Are you interested in knowing your young child in a whole new way? Understanding what's really going on in their developing mind? Does your child say or do things that make you stop and wonder, where did that come from? Well, stick around because this podcast is designed for you. Hello, friends, and welcome, listeners. I'm Dr. Kimberly Bell, the clinical director at the Hannah Perkins Center for Child Development in Cleveland, Ohio. And this is The Hidden Language of Children, a podcast dedicated to understanding the children we love and helping them grow. We created this podcast to help parents and caregivers understand the inner life of children, that constant churning of feelings and emotions that goes on inside of us. This is the work Hannah Perkins has been doing with children and families since 1951. We help kids become the boss of themselves. We want to share it with you because our approach to understanding children reduces conflict and makes life better for everyone. Today, I'm welcoming Kim Sable, a professional photographer who signed on to our approach to social emotional development several years ago when she enrolled her twins in Hannah Perkins School. She's been wanting to share the experience. Welcome, Kim.
Thanks for having me.
So, how long ago did you come to Hannah Perkins for your kids to be in school?
Oh gosh, my kids are 8 and they were about 17 months when they started toddler group.
Okay, so you started early. What
Yeah.
brought you to Hannah Perkins?
It was a family referral. I'd had some nieces and nephews who had wonderful experiences, and I'd grown up with a mom who's a social worker, and the idea of coping skills and empathy, that was the messaging in our household growing up, the importance of those. And it was just natural fit to prioritize my kids' development.
So you had some of that growing up in your household, and it was part of your family culture to think about social emotional development. Did that make the transition into Hannah Perkins then easier for you, or did it seem like a brand new way of thinking?
No, it was all new. Parenting was new, right? I wanted my whole life to be a mom, and here I am. I've got these two babies who are very different from one another, and where's my instruction manual? I don't understand what I'm supposed to do with them or why they're acting the way they're acting. And so I was really excited for the program, but at the same
Mhm.
time, I had no idea what to expect.
I think you make a really important point about parenting, that no matter how you were raised, you may have a foundation for a way of understanding things, but nobody is prepared for parenting. Would you say that that's true?
Yeah, I mean, it's so instinct based, it's so reactive,
Mhm.
right? And in
Mhm.
real time, what I do or think really has nothing to do with what I tell myself when I'm in a given situation I will do or think. And so it's reconciling those two things and learning a new language to communicate with my kids in a way that they would understand. Well, that's all brand new.
Mhm. So tell us a little bit about your experience. Let's sort of start with the toddler group because you started young.
Yeah. So when I started, so my kids are Charlotte and Cameron, and they developmentally, physically, and emotionally were very different really early on. Charlotte was crawling when we started toddler group. She couldn't walk herself to the door to go to outside time. I had to carry her. And so we really got to see her become a little person from a baby in that classroom. But there were things that stand out to me as a mom that were, the expectations for where they should be versus where they were walking. There was nothing we can do about that. We knew developmentally she was on track. It was a small feet issue and a balance issue. But, at snack time, the kids would be given a cup. And these are little babies. They would have spilled it right on themselves immediately. Cameron was eating crayons when they were supposed to be coloring with them. We would literally be prying them out of his mouth. And so I had to find the balance between sticking to my guns to advocate for my kids and also reconciling what I felt was judgment based on those times where I would want something different than what was being asked of them in the classroom. So snack time with the cups, I brought sippy cups and we kind of negotiated that we would have both at the table to encourage them to, to grow and to
Mhm.
learn to use the actual cup. But at the same time, they were the youngest in the class. There were kids who were a year older than them, and they were drinking, and my kids were spilling it all over themselves. And I didn't want them to feel bad about themselves because of
Mhm.
social pressure. So I insisted that they have a sippy cup, and the teachers weren't thrilled because they wanted to empower the kids to grow and not treat them like babies. But at the same time, I wanted to advocate for them where they were
Mhm.
while encouraging them to be further.
Yeah, what's so interesting about that is that, you started off by saying, "Where is my manual? Like, who am I gonna be with these kids?" And yet, you really know them best, right? Like, in that scenario, you were able to work with the teachers and say, "Wait a minute, I know my child best, and this is what I want for my child," which is kind of the exact empowerment that you wanna have, right? Like, there's this dual sense of, I don't know what I'm doing, but wait, I do want to do it this way.
Right. Right.
And, that in and of itself grows your confidence as a parent as you're able to experience those things. What do you think about the difference between, and you may not have experienced, so maybe you can't speak to it, but what do you think about the difference between a toddler program where you attended with your child versus a program? What might it have felt like to take your child to a program at that age that didn't include you?
You know, they were little, and
Mhm,
I had waited a long time to get them in my life,
mhm,
and I was selfish. So I wanted the socialization, I wanted the the enrichment and the benefit that came with doing a toddler program, but at the same time, I was unwilling to ship them off to boarding school, so to
mhm.
speak, is what it that's what it would
That's
have
what it
felt.
felt like to you.
Yeah. So, I to me, it was the perfect fit. It wasn't overwhelming. It was 2 days a week, right? So, it was the perfect balance because they had the teacher to follow. They had the teacher to lead them in the classroom environment, but they had me there by their side. And I looked at other programs where the parents would stay on the wall and the kids would do school. And I was like, well, I'm not really having this experience with them. And
Mhm.
that's what something about the Hannah Perkins toddler group that I liked is that it was an experience that I had with them.
One of the reasons why we focus on that so much in the toddler group too is because as you have that experience with your child, you are investing in their school experience. They see you investing in their school experience, and they then learn to invest in their school experience
Mhm.
through that connection with you. You exist with them in that space so that when they then transition to preschool, they're going there without you eventually. How was that transition then for you guys?
So going from toddler group to preschool, uh, it was good. It wasn't the environment I expected it to be. I did have some reservations after the first couple weeks of preschool. It wasn't what I pictured preschool to look like or feel like. I
Mhm.
remember being taken aback that they never introduced the kids to each other. There was no ice breaking
Yeah. Mhm.
ceremonial
Mhm.
circle time where everyone said their names. My reaction was, how cold, how,
Mhm.
everyone's a stranger and uncomfortable and it's a new environment and you don't know these people. So thank goodness I was there because otherwise they would have not known anybody. And they didn't yet have the knowledge, the social graces to introduce. So it was me saying, hi, what's your name? This is Cameron. So I was put off by that until again, it goes back to the confidence that going through the Hannah Perkins processes helped me develop as a mom and as a person, um, was the confidence to tell my family helper how I was feeling. And
Mhm.
I don't like this. And then she was able to explain to me why. And it made sense. And once I allowed myself to voice the things that felt weird or I remember saying I felt like this was that you imagine singing and colors and music and playing the tambourine and
Mhm.
you imagine
Right.
preschool. And her response to me was, well, how overwhelming could that be for a kid who's a little freaked out by where they are, and now you overstimulate them, and if they want music they'll ask for it. And so it it let me slow down this advance to being in school. And it let me see it from the perspective of, let the child get there when they're ready, instead of, okay, check the box, you're in preschool, now start singing. And
Right.
it
Right.
it, it was different. But
Mhm.
any parent that I've talked to who was thinking about going, I made sure to let them know. It felt weird at first, but
Mhm.
it was my own projections about what I thought it was supposed to be like versus what I was experiencing.
So, you mentioned the family helper. So, from your perspective, talk about the role of the family helper. So, for everybody who's listening, at Hannah Perkins in our school, every family has a family helper that they meet with and talk about their child's school experience, any developmental questions that they might have. That person is sort of available throughout the school, and you meet like once a week. Um, how did you understand the role of that person?
So, as I understood it before I was in it, it was exactly what you said. Somebody who
Mhm.
would observe the classroom, meet with the teachers, and then report back to me about where my children were and what they were doing or how they were doing, and help me navigate any challenges based on the knowledge they have from their time in the classroom and the teachers' perspectives. What I found is, I touched on this before, they were a instruction manual. They were a live chat support
Right.
system for my kids. And the enlightenment I got from some of the conversations I had not only helped me better understand my kids, but helped me understand me and what I could do to navigate this parenting thing with my kids. And so it was incredible.
So, given some of the reservations or experiences that you had of like, okay, this isn't what I thought it was going to be, and how do I make this work for my kids? What do you think would be, I don't know, some of the things that you ended up taking from the toddler group or preschool that has sort of stuck with you in your parenting?
Some of the biggest were ways that I could modify what I said in a way to think about how my kid was hearing it. And I
Mhm.
remember in toddler group that they would say, if the kid was running down the hall, stop your feet. They wouldn't just say stop. And I found that blew my mind, right? It was like, oh my, yeah, they don't know if I'm saying stop singing, stop laughing, stop, you know.
Mhm.
So to give them, to break it down, right? To
Mhm.
dumb it down, so to speak. That's not the right term, but to be explicit in, what am I wanting you to stop? And that simple modification was so helpful.
Mhm.
And learning to understand that even to this day, my 8-year-old, I hope he doesn't watch this, his behavior tanks. And I'm like, do you have to go to the bathroom? Because when you are fighting your body, you are fighting me, was probably, above everything I learned at Hannah Perkins, was the most enlightening thing, because it was textbook with this kid. But just really to try to understand that their actions and their behaviors are indicators for something that lays beneath the surface that might not be as obvious, or maybe it's so obvious.
Mhm.
And understanding that he's not being bad, he's fighting something, right?
Mhm.
So all of that was just huge for me.
Mhm.
And I still try to remind myself. I do some Hannah Perkins self-talk all the time.
What does that sound like?
Oh, I don't know. I gotta think of an example, but just that recently there was something that the kids did, and we were just flabbergasted that they did or didn't do something that was so obvious. And
Mhm.
I said to my husband in front of the kids, because I think they should see that we aren't perfect.
Mhm.
And I said to my husband, "We have 40 some years of experience to know that that is a given. That is a no-brainer. But this is their first time going through this experience. Why what gives us the audacity to think that they should know better?" Right? It's one of those parent you should have known better,
Mhm.
right? Why? How
Mhm.
now they know, but we need to
Mhm.
cut them some slack and give them the grace to learn these things that are so obvious to us, but
Right.
they're not to them.
Mhm.
And I think that those are the lessons that really have stuck with me through Hannah Perkins, but also just prioritizing their social emotional well-being above everything. I mean, even we talk they're in 3rd grade, but we talk about I do not care if they ever take an AP class. I really don't, because I want them to learn to love to learn, but I want them to be a whole person,
Mhm.
and I don't care about the achievement aspect. Uh, they'll learn, and I think that that's that subliminal messaging coming from preschool at Hannah Perkins. It's an incredible academic environment, but nobody talks about that. That's kind of the given, right?
Mhm.
My kids left reading, and they started kindergarten reading, and not all their classmates were where they were, but I was much more aware of their social emotional advanced stage over their peers.
Mhm.
The academics was there,
Mhm.
but where I felt that they were a step ahead of their classmates, or maybe their classmates' parents, was the the whole person development that happened through
Mhm.
our time there.
Mhm. I think I'm noticing just sort of a couple of different things that you're saying that are so interesting. The first one being that I think there is no program that I think is a perfect fit for anybody. Do you know what I mean? It's one of our main tenets at Hannah Perkins is that we adapt to the individual needs of the child. That's true when we do therapy with a child, that's true in the school, that we start out with a framework, and then as a child responds, as parents respond, as there's the push and the pull and the give and the take, we learn about that child as an individual. And then we create these compromises and these scenarios and all of these different things for that particular child, whether that's a child who has two parents who don't live together, whether that's a child who has a nanny, whether that's a child who kind of grew up being in daycare and is now trying to do a different kind of separation process. um, any child you bring into any academic structure may not be the perfect fit. And I think it's when the environment is rigid and inflexible to the point that you can't find a compromise. And I think it sounds like the family helper really was there for you to say, well, here's the perspective of the school. Let's talk about your perspective. Let's find, what's the compromise. Let's talk to the teacher. And you end up spending so much time genuinely thinking about your child
Yeah.
in this environment. And the second point that I thought was really interesting that you just said was that in the midst of all of this focus, right? In the midst of starting off with your children with, sippy cups versus regular cups, and they leave preschool then reading, um, that development happens, that learning, when you open up the door socially and emotionally, that learning then happens. And we don't always have to be so focused on the flashcards or the skill development, because once you develop this sort of love of learning, then the learning kind of happens
Hmm.
when you're paying attention to the social emotional stuff. Um, is that a good reflection of your experience?
Absolutely. And, my mom laughs at me because she says, "Nobody talks to your kids the way you talk to them."
Mm,
And I think that's another offshoot is one thing that's so unique about the teacher student dynamic at Hannah Perkins
Mhm.
is they are spoken to as real people. They are not talked down to at
Mhm.
any point. There's no um, setting the expectation for what they can or cannot do. You're going to push the snack cart. If you need a little help steering because you can't see over it, I'm
Yeah.
there to help you, but I'm not going to point out the fact that I'm there helping you. I'm just there to help you. But they were spoken to as if they were much older than I think most people would. And I've continued
Mhm.
that. I talk to them about everything, mostly feeling things. And if it goes over their head, that's okay. I'm sure the same topic will come up in a couple months
Right.
and we'll catch it then. But
Mhm.
we talk about all these things and I see them doing the same thing.
Hmm.
You know,
Do you think your kids are more likely to come to you with their feelings because of this kind of relationship that you developed with them?
we'll see what happens when they get
Turn
older.
when they
They're
turn teenagers?
they're 8, but at this point, it doesn't occur to them not to,
Mhm. Mhm.
right? So, although I have one who's very emotive, a little too emotive at times. And I have one who's a withholder. And these are, again, terms that I learned from Hannah
Mhm.
Perkins. She was a bathroom withholder,
Okay.
and now she is a feelings withholder. And that's a struggle. It's much easier for me to say, he's being a maniac. What's underneath that behavior?
Mhm.
Because he's a little bit more of an open book because of that. But my daughter, if she's upset, she shuts down and she puts up walls. And that's a lot harder for me because now it's me guessing, okay, is she upset about this? Is she upset about
Mhm.
that? I don't want to tell her what she's upset about, but at the same time, I want to try to bait the hook and get her to open up. So it's not always easy, but they recognize things at school, dynamics or things that they feel are unfair and they don't present it in a whining, complaining way. It's more of a statement of observation. And so I don't know that I'm not in other people's cars at school pickup, so I don't
Right.
know what's being revealed then, but those are what I'm, seeing is their ability to put their feelings into words in ways that lets me have a constructive conversation with them or to advocate for what they're not getting or needing. Uh, so it's good. I mean, we have a blended family. My husband has 2 girls from his first marriage, and that stirs up a lot of feelings
Mhm.
for my kids, and for them. And so to give them the ability to say, I feel jealous when, daddy spends time when they're over, he pays more attention to them. Well, I kick it into gear and we talk about how they feel. Right. And I want to validate their feelings, but also teach them. And that's something that has been happening since they were 17 months old at Hannah Perkins, learning to just talk about everything.
Mhm. I don't, because you started with them so young, I don't know if you'll be able to sort of respond to this, but do you think that this way of parenting, this very socially emotional way of parenting, is harder than maybe some of the things that your friends choose to do?
Absolutely.
Or yeah?
Oh my God. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure. Yes and no.
Okay.
It comes more naturally to me because
Mhm.
it's how I'm wired, which is probably why I loved Hannah Perkins.
Mhm.
Right. I drink the Kool-Aid.
Mhm.
But it's it's a really easy for some people to be scared of things that are uncomfortable. Even if you look at adults with things that they don't want to acknowledge are going on, they'll easily just turn a blind eye. Well, that doesn't make it go away.
Mhm.
And it is harder to address it and to have the hard conversations. And I think with parenting and with kids, it's the same thing. So there were definitely times where I would say something and my husband, and here we go again, right? But over the years, I think he came to appreciate that we're going to the core issue. We're not just putting a band-aid on it.
So, one of the phrases that I always go back to is that children can get through anything that can be talked about. And I think that's true for all people. I think human beings can get through anything that can be talked about. And I think sometimes when you drop your kids off to school and you wave and everything is sort of sunny and rosy, it can be frustrating if the teachers don't tell you what's going on, or you feel disconnected, or the teachers are quietly judging you for something that happened or the way the kids came to school. And I think one of the things at Hannah Perkins that can be very, jarring, but in the end really helpful, is that we don't shy away from difficult conversations. We don't shy away from talking about big feelings or hard things, or there's sort of this, okay, let's talk about it and kind of get through it. And that can feel really uncomfortable at first, I think. And then you start to get used to, like, oh wait, they can talk to me about those concerns, but I can talk to them about my concerns.
I
And
was
then it becomes collaborative,
Yeah,
right?
I was just recalling this morning that recently I learned, okay, you can, as a parent, you can change a consequence,
Right.
right? If I'm reactive and I said, you don't get your iPad for a week or a month, and it had nothing, and later on I'm like, why did I, like, he made a mistake. Like,
Yeah.
you can edit yourself and you can let your kid know that. And I
Mhm.
think that to show that vulnerability and to allow yourself to feel vulnerable
Mhm.
as a kid, as a parent,
Yeah.
as a coworker, whatever it might be. I think that is a lesson that starts through Hannah Perkins, like even the separation process. You
Mhm.
feel vulnerable. It's torture for why are you torturing these kids? But
Mhm.
when it's explained to you, it makes so much sense, right? Like
Mhm.
they can handle it and they can realize that they can handle more. You don't need to shy away from it. Now we all have our cell phones, and when you feel anxious, you ignore the anxiety by playing some Candy Crush game on your phone to avoid it. Well, that's not helping you deal with it. And
Right.
that's the lesson I think that the kids are given right away at Hannah
Mhm.
Perkins, is that if you ignored it, it's not going to go away. So let's address it head on and
Mhm.
let's go through it. And
Yeah.
you'll see that you now have tools.
Yeah.
So I think that to me has been the biggest, advantage that we've seen. Well, I don't know. There's a lot of them.
Yeah. I think, yeah, every family sort of takes exactly what they need.
I do
That's
think
that's
Hannah
kind of
Perkins
my
go through
experience.
8th grade, and it would be really
Yeah.
helpful because these kids get harder and more complicated. And where are these
Yeah.
child development experts in my day to day?
Yes, yes. Thank you so much for
Thank
coming
you for
on to the
having me on.
podcast. It's been absolutely great talking to you, and hopefully maybe we'll come up with reasons to talk to you again in future. All right.
So
Have
good.
a
Thank
great
you so
day.
much.
Bye-bye. We always like to do something a little fun or different before signing off each edition of The Hidden Language of Children. Today, we've got Bob Rosenbaum here. He's the person who gets things lined up and keeps things on schedule with this podcast. But today, Bob is jumping in as his alter ego, the word guy. And he has brought a little bit of a rant here with him.
Thanks, Kim. I'm here to talk to you today about the most maligned concept in parenting since castor oil. Yeah, we're talking about the timeout. There's parenting gurus all over the place who will call the timeout a minor punishment. Not too long ago on the morning news, I heard one of the national anchors doing a feature piece on the timeout, and she referred to the timeout chair, and she said it doesn't work, that when she points to the timeout chair and tells her son to sit in it, he only gets angrier and more upset. Well, of course, because a timeout, she's treating it like a punishment. Look, there's no magic in the words timeout. By assigning the words timeout to what you're trying to do doesn't make everything hunky dory. Timeout has to be said right, it has to be done right. So let's look at the origin of the word. It's a sports metaphor. If things are not going well on the playing field and the referee calls his whistle and he points at a player and he points to the side of the field, that's not a timeout. That's a penalty, and the player's going to go sit in the penalty box or the timeout chair, if you will. But if things are going poorly on the field and the coach does one of these and he calls a timeout and the referee blows his whistle and play stops, the coach doesn't send his players to the chair. He brings his players into a circle and he says, hey, let's calm down. We're doing fine, but we need to make some adjustments. So take a breath and let's make a plan. And they work on it together. It's a beautiful thing. And hopefully the team comes back on the field and everybody's winning. Um, so next time you're having one of those moments, um, skip the anger. Don't point to a chair, and don't think of yourself as the referee. Think of yourself as the coach. Call a timeout and understand the timeout is not just for the child, it's also for you, because maybe you're getting a little upset too. And the right language is something like, hey, things are not going well. Let's sit here quietly. Let's just love each other for a minute. We're both angry, but if we just sit quietly and share each other's time, we can calm down. And when we're calm, we'll discuss it and things will get better. That's not a punishment. That's a timeout. Thanks. I'm Bob, the word guy.
All right. Thanks, Bob. That's our time for today. If you'd like us to answer a question about your child's behavior, send us an email at thehiddenlanguageofchildren@gmail.com or visit our website at hiddenlanguageofchildren.org. Thank you for joining us. We are grateful to all of our listeners today. We hope you enjoyed this conversation and found it to be helpful when making parenting decisions appropriate for your child. The Hidden Language of Children podcast is a production of the nonprofit Hannah Perkins Center for Child Development in beautiful Shaker Heights, Ohio. If you like this podcast, please subscribe to hear future episodes and share it with friends and family. We welcome comments and questions. I'm Dr. Kimberly Bell, and we will see you next time.